Hi, everyone. This is Brandon Adams, formerly of the Brandon Adams podcast. I'm launching a new podcast called the AI Metagame. Unlike my previous podcast, where I was mostly winging it, this is a very structured podcast where we're doing 12 episodes. My guest for the first episode is Kory Kilpatrick. Kory is a former poker player. Like many former poker players, he was in the sports world for a little bit, and then he has shifted to AI. A shocking number of poker alumni are now deep in the AI streets, but Kory beat everyone to the AI streets by at least 5 years. He's been deep in the coding world since 2016 or 17. Kory, could you give us just a brief snippet on your background?
Yeah, found poker in high school, got really obsessed, kind of spent 8 years around the clock doing that, achieved everything I wanted to out of it, was, my mid 20s thinking about what I wanted to do in life, and was spending all my time reading about AI. I like got introduced to the kind of Bay Area rationalist community where a lot of this stuff, the origins of all these big companies, live. And yeah, it became very clear to me really quickly that we were on a trajectory towards some really cool stuff happening. And this is around 2016. I actually remember when OpenAI was founded, I was like, oh, if I ever got a job, like OpenAI would probably be where it was in 2016. I was in San Francisco at the time. So eventually realized I was bottlenecked on my understandings by learning to code. So I did a coding boot camp and then spent a couple years just like trying to speed run the equivalent of a CS degree. Had a good mentor in San Francisco for that. And then naturally was like, okay, well, I want to level up my skills, tap my network, found some former poker players who had gotten into sports, and there was a lot of opportunities there that led to me uh, co-founding a sports business, kind of a trading platform. Did that for a couple years, fully automated it, and then stepped away in 2022. And then since then, I've just been doing various entrepreneurial endeavors, still doing a lot of lots of former colleagues always pestering me to write code for them and do projects, and been doing that. Had a brief stint at Twilio, where I got recruited to lead product. Spend a lot of time in product. Since GPT-4's release, I mean, I've been deep into the AI streets ever since getting into coding. It's been my primary focus. But when GPT-4 was released, it was a clear like bit flip in my world where I was like, oh, we are living in the AI era, with all capital letters now. And since then, I've been evangelizing LLMs to everyone who will lend me their ear, and spending all day just obsessing over how to get the most alpha out of these tools, staying on the leading edge, trying to push the bounds. Last year, I did Gauntlet AI. Was in the first cohort in Austin, where it was 100 hours a week of just building vibe coding. Basically, I was basically doing that on my own before, so I went and did that for 3 months, and then yeah, now I'm doing. I have my hand in way too many projects, but been doing this consulting thing since its inception, and it's been really great to work with executives and see how big the gap is between what AI is capable and how it's deployed even at the highest level in the real economy right now. And yeah, so that's where I'm at.
Well, I feel like I have a very short time to have you as an expert and teacher in my small network, 5HC. I feel like you're outgrowing me very rapidly, and we'll move on. But hopefully we can do one recruiting trip to Palo Alto where we recruit some more experts and teachers before you
Yeah.
leave. But I'll give some background for the audience. I started an AI-centered expert network around a year ago. Um, I undertook a major web effort, which is going to be a central topic of this podcast. The network was not going very well for 6 months. I had a network of experts that I believed in very strongly. They were super capable, but it wasn't a very good business. I was my own biggest customer by a million miles. That turned out to be great in the sense that I developed my skills and I learned a lot about AI, but it was not a good business from income statement side. I also had some failings in building the tech, which we're going to talk about in this episode. Um, there were two great things that happened around the end of last year towards, I don't know, mid-November. There was the release of Claude Code in Opus 4.5. There was also a trip that I took with one of my more capable friends, a very senior manager, where he announced his intention to learn AI, and he started working with you specifically. And I believe he did 12 hours the first week, and then 10 or so hours the second week, and then started referring you and other experts to his network, and that turned out to be transformative. Where all of a sudden we were doing a lot of teaching, which was not really the original intent of 5HC. It was not. I built it more as an expert network, not really high-end executive coaching, but it's sort of evolved to be more high-end executive coaching. And I believe I told you like the first hour after we worked together that I thought you were a really gifted teacher. And then that turned out to be spectacularly the case, where you get extremely rave reviews from everyone who works with you, which has to be a little bit rewarding.
Uh, Definitely. Yeah, I've done a lot of teaching in various forms I over my life, going all the way back to when I was a teenager. My first trip to Las Vegas for the World Series of Poker, I was underage, and it was because I was backing people who were playing in the World Series events who I'd been teaching for years. I've done a lot of all the way from mentoring elementary schools to coaching poker to doing lots of teaching on the AI front for years. Yeah, it's just something I enjoy doing.
So, one of the reasons I allowed the pivot towards high-end executive coaching to happen is that my original vision for the expert network was that the transcripts that would be generated would be super valuable in basically developing a knowledge base about AI. That turned out to be not the case because AI changes so quickly that a stale transcript is not worth anything. However, your teaching transcripts are valuable because they serve as a basis for future lesson plans, and they also serve as a benchmark for optimal teaching process. So your score as a teacher is 100 out of 100, but I have other people that are 85 out of 100, and I can examine their transcripts and think about what they've done differently and benchmark off you to teach them to do better. It's been a very interesting process, and you and I actually haven't had a lot of time to download on what gives you the strong evals and referrals that you have. But what I've learned reading transcripts is that it has a lot to do with patience. You're a very good listener. It has a lot to do with the ability to go from a 30,000-foot strategic view to deep in the weeds in a very short period of time. And it obviously has to do with deep technical understanding. Um, it's probably the process has probably helped a lot by you being largely self-taught, I would say. Um, and then I think there's a lot of emotional intelligence at play as well, because one of the things I've observed in these teaching sessions is that there is an element of psychologist at play. Like there is an element of, okay, the busy executive, they could have taught themselves AI by watching YouTube videos or just chatting with the frontier model, and that would be free, by the way. They chose to pay $700 an hour to chat with you. Why? Uh, I think part of it is that they know that AI change is something very important in their life. They know that they need to devote some time thinking about it. They set aside the hour and they want to meet some signposts in that hour. They want to learn, but they also want to just contemplate this big picture idea of AI change in their life. So when I read the transcripts, sometimes they're just talking about nothing for 5 minutes and you're letting them go. And then at the end of the 5 minutes, you rein them back in and hit the lesson plan objectives. Um, I look at transcripts that are not as patient, and I understand why someone is clocking through the lesson plan just so, but it's clearly not as effective because the evals and the referrals are not as strong. I wonder, what do you see going on in the highly effective sessions?
Yeah, so I have a somewhat radical belief. I think that a lot of learning bottlenecks are emotional and not cognitive. And I think there's certainly limits to that. But with this population in particular, these are all incredibly intelligent people, incredibly capable people. Learning LLMs today is not that complex. Maybe there's a lot more skill into getting value out of them in their earlier days, but now it's as simple as talking to it, like you mentioned, and just having them kind of tell you what they can do. But there's a couple things like one, I think that there is a lot of feelings wrapped up into like learning AI. There's kind of, I don't know, it sounds kind of scary, I think, for someone who's not deeply in the weeds to be like, gosh, AI, that sounds like a kind of intimidating process. How could I possibly learn it? And even though the chatbots are very accessible, it's helpful. Um, to have someone to help ground you who you know you can like rely on and who you're not going to like go astray, especially for these people who have very tight time constraints. They don't want to spend their hour going in circles, so it's worth a lot of money for them to make sure that they are headed on the optimal path toward mastery or whatever their objective is. um, but yeah, I mean the patience, it's I think that getting outside your comfort zone is scary for anyone, including top executives. And the kind of like the dance is like always trying to start by just like grounding into the session and just like relating and getting that level of comfort. And that creates the kind of um, headspace where optimal learning can occur, in my experience.
So let's get into me as student because obviously I've done a lot of sessions with you. Um, I want to talk about a failure at 5HC, which is the website, 5hc.ai. It's not a complete failure at this point. The website works. You can book with Kory there. You can do the call there. Um, and it's getting better by the day, but it is not where I hope to be, and the process has not been especially smooth or fast. One would think that in the AI era, the spinning up of a website with mostly 20-year-old technology would not be so difficult. I largely made a mess of it. So, talk me through me as student and whether you think we could vibe code a V2 together, or
Well,
I could vibe code a V2.
yeah. Uh, Today, February 23rd, 2026, you have to always date these things because it changes so quickly. I do think you could, I do think you could vibe code the end-to-end product. right now, mainly with Codex's help. Codex 5.3 extra high is really fantastic at coding. So you started by contracting a company to build the website for you, correct?
I started before that. I started by chatting with ChatGPT about how
Oh.
to
So the
contract with a company.
first lines of code of the code base that's in production right now were written by ChatGPT.
No, no, that's not correct.
Okay.
I was getting ideas about the structure of the website and about what type of platform I might use and what type of contractor I might look for by chatting with ChatGPT. One thing I didn't know then that I know now is that because of the stale training data problem, these frontier models give you very bad time and money estimates for the cost of doing technical
Horrible
work.
ones, yeah.
So these things are also non-deterministic. So when you ask a somewhat unique question like this, uh, you might get a different answer each time. In this case, when I asked OpenAI, it suggested ShareTribe, which is a marketplace platform. It suggested like a customized application built on top of ShareTribe. I think that was a big mistake. Um, and so I was engaging a contractor that specialized in ShareTribe. It's not a flexible platform and it doesn't look especially good. So that was an error on my part. But a big part of the reason I committed that error, I think, is because I was getting bad estimates about the time and money involved in constructing a more professional website. If one looks at, say, intro.co, that is a gorgeous website. ChatGPT would tell you that that would take 800K and 9 months to build.
Yeah,
I think you and I probably both believe now that it would take certainly less than 50K and not very much time.
significantly less than 50K and significantly less than 9 months. Yeah.
So, what are some what are some lessons that I learned? I will say complexity kills, right? And I knew early on that the path I had undertaken was loaded with complexity. The first sign was that the contractor was having me start all these different accounts, right? I must have had like 9 software as a service accounts that were quote unquote necessary
Yeah.
to make the site work. Um, as soon as you're in that level of complexity, I think you're kind of dead, right? You're just tied up. It's very fragile all of a sudden. Any one of those accounts could have something go amiss, like they're hacked, they're down, you forget to update your payment, whatever, and now everything doesn't work. So in the V2, a big part of it would be to keep the level of complexity way down. Even if that meant, by the way, that I would hold off on doing a V2 until tools smoothened out and you wouldn't have to have as many connectors. Because I can envision a world, I think you and I both agree that all of these connecting accounts will become less necessary in the future to build a site like intro.co. Say you won't need the calendar app, the payments app, the transcription app, the security
Or
app,
you
all
might
three of
have them
those.
all, but they may all be bundled into a single consolidated interface that you're interacting with. So
I would almost
effectively,
be
you don't
willing to
want that.
wait. I would almost be willing to wait for like Opus 4.7 and Codex
Yeah.
5.4 and having more simplicity on that side
Yeah.
before I started, but I'm going to engage the process. By the way, Opus 4.6 thinks that the V2 would be a 20 to 40 hour project. Like that sounds low, but that's sort of
There's no, I've never seen an LLM generate a remotely accurate time frame um, on anything pertaining to uh, tasks that involve an LLM in the loop. They're horribly unself-aware. But it makes sense. Their training data is all, they're pulling from reason. Those would have been reasonable time frames in the pre-AI, pre-LLM era. They're probably relatively accurate. I mean, time frames are always incredibly difficult to estimate, but they're probably pretty accurate. But they just don't know what they're capable of. It's actually a point that I drive home in the sessions with clients a lot. Is this is you know, I always teach them to go meta and like ask like you're doing. You've gotten really good at this, at asking the LLMs about upfront on the meta level, like what you should be focusing on, how they can help you solve your problem. But there's an asterisk to that, and there's a couple of them, but the one that we're highlighting right now is that they are horribly unaware of what they are capable of, and you have to keep that in mind when doing this because, or you fall right into the trap that you did there, which is it's a very easy trap to fall into because these things are so good at helping you solve problems and even helping you learn how to use them to solve your problems. And this is just like an edge case that you have to be cognizant of. And if you're not, you can end up in some precarious situations.
they always have an answer, which is both a blessing and a curse.
Well said.
The so if the big loss for me is the website and the complexity that I feel like that's engendered, the big win for me in AI is my personal agent, which I feel like has made me 5 to 10 times more productive.
Yeah, you got a good one. You've done well with that.
It does seem to get to know me better and better, whether that's because the all of the Claude MD files are improving more and more, or just the having the session logs and the decision logs. It's not entirely clear why it gets to know me better and better, but it does, and I'm in the process now of borrowing various items from Claude Bot that I think are most interesting and aren't going to blow up my entire life by
Yeah.
sending people random emails. By the way, did your agent send me that email this morning?
No, I don't have agents doing writes on emails right now, only reads. This is something that yeah, there's no official like verified MCP server from any of the big like Anthropic or anyone who allows for writes. They're all third-party ones, and some of them are probably totally safe, but I wouldn't want to use any third-party LLM application or MCP server or whatever without having like a really, really strong vouch or vetting it myself. And I just haven't had either of one of those things occur yet. So yeah, I'm still writing emails like a old pre-AI human, but also if it's anything that's long, it's easy to have AI in the loop. I use Superhuman, which has great AI features. Um, but yeah, but I'm also kind of kind of write emails like a boomer. I tend to be pretty short and to the point with them. So
I have the AIs write my emails now, but I don't have them send. I wait and send it later. So as I contemplate this V2, I'll give you a couple things that I have in mind that I've learned from other projects, and you can supply some additional warnings to me. What I've observed in the bigger projects that I've taken on is that the computer has limitations, but it's extremely capable. The human is not that capable. So our human RAM is really what limits us. We can spin up a lot of complexity. We can spin up a lot of files. But keeping track of all of the complexity that we create, especially when you put it aside for a moment and then take a break for a day or more and come back to it, I find that there can be a moment where you struggle to re-engage because you had your mind wrapped around all the complexity and you were right there. And then there's just enough memory loss that when you go to re-engage the project, you don't quite have a handle on it. My agent is helpful in like getting me back in it. But I find this is a problem, and this is a problem that writers have as well, especially when they get to the end of a book, they it's too much
Yeah.
and they're trying to wrap up all the ends, but their mind is struggling to grasp all of the complexity that they've created, and many projects go unfinished, right? For this reason. Um,
Shots fired, George R. R. Martin.
what are some of your tips for keeping abreast of the complexity that we create with LLMs?
Yeah, so a number of things come up. The most important one, and this is something that I'm constantly thinking about and dialoguing with colleagues, is how can you just get more context down in natural language text, or really like anything that you have, but preferably natural language text. You can't have too much context for these things, especially when you're talking about the agents like Claude Code, having records of your thought processes, just getting everything in your brain into a preferably markdown file can really pay dividends. And I'm constantly trying to figure out how to streamline that process. So one like kind of workflow that I added relatively recently is I've been working on a project with a colleague, and we're meeting on Google Meet and kind of going through early startup-y stuff. And we're taking all of our calls, transcribing them, and then putting them in a dedicated directory. And it's super easy for us to onboard, not just our calls, but any calls related to the project, any artifacts generated related to the project, consolidating them into a single place where Claude Code can have that context. And there's no cost to it. If it's not useful, you can just steer the agent away from it. If you want to just do this kind of high level, like look at all the things and see what kind of recommendations come out, or if you have a question about like uh, yeah, any kind of patterns that have emerged through your thought process or the evolution of it. It's just these things are the value that you get out of LLMs is entirely gated by the context that they have. So, and this is a principle that I really hammer home with the executives as well, is you just got to get the things out of your head into a form where they can work with them, and you need to be injecting the LLMs into your workflows wherever you can at the earliest point of the workflow that you can. So, yeah, in terms of picking up context where you left off, another example is for all of my consulting clients, I have a consulting directory. Every client has a subdirectory within that. Every session has a subdirectory in that. I've got skills that will initialize all the sessions, creating relevant files for like prep, recaps, any metadata, billing, just anything related to it. Also have as soon as a session ends, I just have a command that I run that does all the wrap up for the session. It grabs the transcript that I had from it, puts it in the right place, distills it into a recap, exports it so that I can one click email it to you. And all of that is streamlined into one command to start, one command to finish. And what that allows me to do is I have such thorough records of everything that I've done with these clients that when I sit down before my next session, get there 5 minutes early and just say, hey, where did we leave off? And I can get Claude in the loop on getting right back to that seat very easily without me having to expend any cognitive cycles on trying to remember things. There's no remembering. It's get it all out and have it and retrieve it on demand when needed. And it's not even just like a retrieval process, like a database query. It's a living document. You turn all of these static artifacts into living documents that you can play with, that you can brainstorm with, can generate ideas from, do analysis on. Um, so yeah, it's just getting absolutely everything wherever you can down into some format that is easily digestible by the LLM.
One version of that that I've been doing recently is it's old wisdom that the best thinking comes in the shower and in the car.
Yeah,
I'll take out the voice memos in the car and just sort of let the subconscious go. And then I'll have Claude convert it into Markdown and analyze deeply all the things that I've been thinking about. And that has proven a very effective tactic.
that's excellent. Yeah. And you should get a Tesla because the Grok voice mode in the new Teslas is really good for that as well. Whenever I'm driving, I'm talking to it.
So, another challenge with using AI in the business setting is that we still have massive dependencies and bottlenecks in the human run part of the world, right? So you can move very quickly in a well-defined straight line, but moving in a straight line has its limits. Eventually, you're going to run into dependencies, and a lot of times those dependencies take weeks, which is a massive frustration for executives, say, where any task where you can define a straight line, define the project clearly, and have the AI just run along that straight path is astonishingly fast. But then you might run into a roadblock, which could, in a business context, be like the CTO needing to sign off on something for security reasons. And by the way, it might take 3 months. And it doesn't feel like we've gotten much faster in dealing with dependencies and bottlenecks. What do you, what do you advise executives that have these frustrations?
So AI can't do everything, not yet at least. So there's invariably you're going to have things in the real world. You're going to be waiting for people to get back to you or approvals to be cleared or whatever it is. Your job is just to, again, it's getting everything out of your head because um, not only does that give the context to the AIs so that you can hit the ground running as soon as you are unblocked by that bottleneck, but it also frees up the cognitive bandwidth that might be kicking around your head. That's like, oh, I need to remember to do this. I'm waiting for this to get back to me in 2 weeks. And then when it does, I need to take this action. So like 5 years ago, I read the book Getting Things Done, and I like have full sent the kind of getting things done methodology into my life. And it's been like a really big game changer seeing how the kind of basic gist of the philosophy is you have at any given time, everybody has all these random things kicking around in your head that you're trying to remember, like household things or like people to get back to, or yeah, like, okay, that I know that this person's going to get back to me in a few weeks. And when they do, I need to take these actions. These are like taking up some, cognitive load in your head in like very subtle ways that, are like consuming resources in your brain. And if you can get all of that out of your head, then it frees up capacity to focus on whatever you need to focus on. And you don't have to worry about losing that context, forgetting to message that person or whatever, because you have it in a well organized, structured place so that as soon as you get the trigger to where it's time to take those actions, such as they respond to you, you're ready to just go back to that well organized place and hit the ground running. This is only like amplified in the LLM space because it's not just, I mean, that was really valuable before actually getting all the context in a place where an AI can work with it existed. But now it's like twofold. It's like I think organization is just like one of the key skills to have now. Not just it's like a two-pronged thing where it's like, yeah, it frees you up and it also gives the AI everything it needs to be maximally helpful for you.
Do you think it is worthwhile for people to invest in organization in the ways you're suggesting, given that an alternative investment would be maximally learning the available tools, which are changing every day, and sort of remaining disorganized while you did so? Um, I would say that a big subject of this podcast, the AI metagame, is about how individuals can optimize what I call the learning race. I think the change is so severe at the moment that we all are in a race to learn this stuff as quickly and as effectively as possible. Do you think it's a worthwhile investment to, I don't know, invest a lot in organizational detail, which is a famous time suck, versus investing in learning tools?
Well, Brandon, it was a famous time suck, and no one, I mean, rarely did people actually implement something like a getting things done task management system or whichever one. Because, yeah, like when I did this 5 years ago, what did that look like for me? Taking 2 months of my life dedicated toward getting all the relevant personal and professional things into my life into this hierarchical, well organized, effectively file system in the Todoist app. But now, organization is easy to do with Claude or one of the AIs or Claude Code or something. Um, this is one of the first things that I do. I mean, I think that on the Claude desktop for a bit, I know they were advertising this in Claude Cowork as one of the suggested prompts is like organize my file system. That is so easy for AIs to do. So even if your file system right now looks like uh, everything, every single file is lives on its own in the in your desktop folder. So your desktop's just littered with files. All it takes to get that organized is, the dumb version would just ask Claude Code to organize it for you, and then it'll put it into some folders and it'll do a pretty good job. But the better version would be going meta first and saying, how do I want to be better organized with my file system, interview me to ask me like how I want to think about the organization. You enter a dialogue with Claude because what you want to do, the way these things work most effectively, is if the organization, the hierarchical relationships or whatever the relationships are on your with your artifacts mirrors how you think about them in your head. So you want the associations to all have direct links so that it's kind of like a external brain for you. And then and yeah, so basically, I would push back against these being mutually exclusive things, like focusing on organization or using AI. One of your first entry points should be using AI to help you get organized, and that's for the reasons I've enumerated, but also because the more organized you are, the more helpful something like Claude Code can be for you. I'll illustrate this via a metaphor that I often use. So, just an absolutely brilliant serendipitous thing is that the we have this perfect metaphor for how LLMs work, which is based on the movie Memento, the Christopher Nolan classic, amazing movie. You have to watch it if you're listening to this as your homework. Um, it's work time because it teaches you about AI. But the gist of it is basically the protagonist is in the middle of like a conflict, but he has some like condition where his memory gets wiped every like 5 or 10 minutes, and he wakes up. He has no clue where he is or what's going on. And he's learned to leave himself notes so that he can figure it out and get context to like take the next action when he's being like chased or something. So he's written stuff on his arms. He's like write stuff on a mirror or whatever. And so his first task is he wakes up, no clue what's going on in the world, and he sees the notes and he tries to piece together his reality. That is exactly how the LLMs work. They at the start of a chat with an LLM, they have this really big, brilliant brain, but they have no clue what's going on or what is expected of them, and all they have to work with is artifacts. But the artifacts you give them, but they have constraints. After 5 or 10 minutes in the Memento movie, after the length of a context window in the AI world, they have to be reset. They can't function anymore. Start over from scratch. So I analogize. I illustrate this process and the utility in it via way of metaphor that I come back to often with my clients, and I think is helpful. If you think about your file system as an office building. So if everything is just flat on your desktop, it's like someone walking in to the building and that it's one story that is just like infinitely long in either direction or whatever, one long hallway. Things maybe aren't labeled very well. If someone's job was to go into there and to like uh, find find a particular like report or something. They'd have to go and scan every single one of those rooms, walk up and down those hallways. That takes a lot of time. And so for the agent, that means that they have to read through every single file. If you're like, oh, I need to write this memo based on this company, it's like, okay, well, here's a desktop folder. Let me see what's in it. This is where everything is. I've got to read all these things because nothing's labeled well to figure out what if where this thing is so that I can start working with it. You in the memento world, it's like the guy taking multiple minutes to figure out what is going on, as opposed to things being like really cleanly laid out so that he can start moving toward his objective. And by the time, if things aren't organized well, by the time he actually gets to the thing that he needs, uh, or the agent gets to it, they've used up so much context that they can only do a little bit of work for you before they need to reset. Now, contrast this with this office building that is 10 stories. Everything is organized into an appropriate wing. The rooms are well labeled. When you walk into the lobby of the office building, you see this directory and it's got really a detailed map of exactly how you find each thing. Marketing is on floor one, sales is on floor two, engineering is on floor three. The agent can go, the memento guy can just go, okay, I'm looking for this part of the code. I see that it's in the infrastructure wing of the engineering department. It's right there on that sign. He can walk in, get on the elevator, go right there, and have lots of time to do stuff before his memories reset. Your agent can go exactly use the minimum amount of tokens necessary to get to the relevant context to work. And then that means it can work longer for you. It can hold more, the context window can be more densely packed with relevant information, which allows it to do what it does best. So I have lots of thoughts on organization and AI, but I think it is a really essential thing because it is how you both like manage your own, optimize your own cognitive attention and capacity, but also the agents. So it's like really critical.
And it seems like everyone who's devoted to this has converged on a similar solution, Claude code plus a series of well-organized markdown files, or wherever possible, markdown files
Yep.
in an Obsidian vault or something similar where you just have very well-organized and clean markdown files that might be peppered with skills and instructions to the agent. That Claude code is basically interrogating
Yeah,
container.
Markdown's ideal, but whatever artifacts make the most sense for your business, having them in the correct place is the key thing.
So, what are some things that you've learned about the corporate world in doing consultations that you didn't know before? I will say that big picture, both of us have learned that there is a level of underinvestment going on in AI. There is a level of, first of all, at the personal level, it does seem like executives are not devoting enough time to learning AI, like our clients being the exception, but many people are just sort of head in the sand. Then organizationally, I think there's a great deal of conservatism. There's a recognition that the opportunity of AI is vast, but there's also conservatism. Some of the conservatism is for very understandable reasons, like the very clear cybersecurity threat that's coming our
Mhm.
way. And other reasons are less clear, just inertia.
Yeah, there's the security stuff, like there are a number of people who we've talked to who, I mean, yeah, the enterprise relationships and security is a real thing. Sometimes you're blocked by that. I don't have enough insight into how the companies operate and what their constraints are and stuff to have any really well-informed opinion on enterprise relationships, other than the world that I foresee is that anybody who is in anything touching knowledge work will have at least one enterprise relationship, uh, because not having LLMs looped into your workflows, even if it's not engineering, just whatever it is not going to be viable for your business. So, yeah, the things that I've learned from working with corporate people, um, perhaps like one of the most interesting ones is that I think, especially for the more seasoned executives, some of the ways that they operate are actually getting in the way. They're becoming like obsolete or doing a disservice for them in the AI world. So I'm thinking specifically of, these are very sharp people who are really good. Maybe, for some of the CEOs and stuff, maybe their core competency is compressing all of this context about the business and strategy, and predictions about markets and stuff, compressing it all into actionable insights to execute on quickly. And so there's this big compression process. Um, and so I've noticed, like for instance, to be kind of hands-on, that thinking of one client who is really razor sharp, and so uh, we had one of the tasks that he wanted me to do with him was they have he runs a fund, and they have a template for this memo that they send throughout the whole company whenever they're assessing a company that they might want to invest in. He wanted to figure out how he can use AI to streamline that process to help him make these memos, because currently it takes like a couple days for a team to make a single memo, and he suspected that you could do that faster with AI. So one thing that I encourage clients a lot is to start meta, to like be, you have to move a little bit slower than you want to. It's so tempting because these things, you really feel immediately how Oracle like they are. And so you want to just jump right in and have it start solving problems. But if you can just pause and do a quick like syncing up of context about the problem with it, and like quick step of exploring the solution space before jumping right into a solution, it really pays dividends. And it's really hard to get these people to do that. Um, so the way that I always frame it is you really want to start by being descriptive and not prescriptive. So you want to start by just getting the context out of your head, describing the problem, and then getting the LLM in the loop to help you think about solutions instead of jumping straight to a solution. So back to this client, he's like, okay, I suspect that I can use AI to streamline, make it faster to do these memos. So we pull up Claude desktop in a session, and he says, I want to, here is an example of a memo that I use in my company. I want you to make this memo, or make a memo with this template about company Z instead of company X. And Claude's like, okay, great, let's do it. And so he then enters this iterative process of being like, okay, well, no, the formatting needs to be a little different. Here's where you find this information to fill in this section. And maybe 15 to 20 minutes later, he's got a memo of this new company that is like pretty good. So he got like a 90% solution, 90% replica of what took a couple days work for a team in his company to do prior using AI. He's over the moon. He is stoked. He's like, this is incredible. What a huge time saver. What he should have done, another version of this, is instead of starting by saying, make a memo with this template about this other company instead. That is a very prescriptive solution to or approach to solving the problem, which the problem was actually a more meta one, or where he was at. He was thinking, how do I use AI to streamline this process of making these memos and disseminating them throughout my company? That was the actual thing that he sat down at Claude with in his head. But instead of that, he jumped straight to getting it to see if it can make one itself. If instead he had have gone to that meta process and entered with a dialogue, the output probably would have been something like Claude would have been like, "Oh, you should make a skill that gives very prescriptive. You should have a single conversation with me. The end result will be a skill that will tell future AIs exactly how to make these memos, and you can make a script that says all you have to do is input the ticker of a company and it will output this memo with 100% fidelity to what you want." That is, he was over the moon about being able to go from 2 days for a team to do to 20 minutes to get a pretty good version that he would then have people go and fine tune or whatever. If he would have taken a couple minutes to do this like more meta approach and planning process and synchronization with the AI and allowed the AI to surface potential solutions for him that might not be on his head, instead of 20 minutes, let's call it like an hour to do a single company, he has an instant one click of a button to generate the report in perpetuity. And if you think about how that compounds, because he would have been like, "Oh, I used AI to streamline this. This is great." But people don't realize what these things are capable of, and it's so hard for our brains that are so anchored in, the ways that we've operated for the past decades or whatever, that we have to give these things opportunities to surface solutions to our problems before we dive right in. And the cost is just a couple more queries, maybe a couple minutes. Maybe you arrive right at the solution that you thought you should have pursued anyways. And okay, in terms of expected value, like trade-off, like it only has to be really valuable for you very rarely to be worth that couple minutes. So that's one thing that comes to mind.
I think I think this is the reason why people need the one-on-one calls because the meta is scary, the
Yeah.
pace of change. It's like an author thinking about are people ever going to read again when they can have perfect answers to exactly the question that they want with
Yeah.
perfectly timely sources at their fingertip? The answer might be no. uh, but that same author, their livelihood might be writing books. Then they have the thought, well, maybe the AI can write a book with a little bit of instruction that is 95% of the way there. And then they have the thought, well, maybe 100 instances could write 100 different books in a day. And then your mind just blows up, right? So
Yeah.
I think all of us are undergoing that moment where it's like Wall Street, for example, they think, well, if that software as a service company could be replicated 95% of the way there by each individual company with a fairly limited amount of work, what is the proper market cap for that company?
Yeah.
And then we're
Yeah.
all thinking about like, why do any of us need any branded software? Why don't we just write custom for everything? And our minds get blown. So we kind of have to talk ourselves through it a little bit. And I think we see it probably more with the corporate people.
Hmm.
Um, Perhaps it's one of the reasons that poker people seem to be good at AI because if you do anchor on one way of looking at the world, it tends not to go very well. You have to have the flexibility to entirely throw out previous knowledge bases as soon as evidence comes that there's a better way to do things.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this is we are dealing with, you know, tooling that is just, needless to say, totally unprecedented. Not just unprecedented, but like unprecedented is an understatement because, you know, the history of technology in the modern era has just been continual improvements and streamlining of workflows, and especially in the software era, things have just gotten easier to work with, and there's more that you can do. But this is like a complete like step change. It's just it's kind of like brain breaking in terms of, especially for these, yeah, the more seasoned executives, they've gotten really good at working in particular ways, and you have to be flexible. You have to like slow down and yeah, try to like assume these things are super smart, and you want to get them in the problem solving process at the earliest layer that you possibly can, which to me just means like starting by just getting everything out there. It's always just get the context out there and then ask for feedback or just ask any questions you want. Just like that, it's that little step can make a huge difference because I think a lot of people also are not coming around to AI for a couple reasons. One, they just use the free version, and the free versions are, especially ChatGPT, is pretty shit. And so they use the free version. They ask a very simple question. Uh, they get a wrong answer, and they go, "Okay, AI is crap." Or um, they do kind of what I said, where they aren't appreciating how these things kind of think. You kind of have to, you know, appreciate that these things are just when you start a chat, they're just waking up and they are really smart, but they have no clue what's going on. And so if you just ask a question that has that is, you know, one sentence, but is trying to do a relatively complex things, they are trying to infer, like think about the memento guy. He's like, if you know he comes wake and someone's like, you know, uh go solve this problem, he has to first be like, okay, where am I, what's going on, who am I, uh what context do I need, what in the world is this problem, and he's like filling in all these gaps constantly. And when he does that, invariably he's going to fill in the gaps with incorrect stuff, which is going to lead to some kind of output that's not what the original intent was looking for. So just getting, if you can get it context. So yeah, so that's to say, like, if you don't inject that step, it's easy to get a poor outcome. Or, you know, maybe you ask it to give you a time frame for something and you see that it's dumb, and then you're like, okay, AI is not, it's not ready yet. It's not helpful. And the reality is you're just like, you know, use the correct model. It's amazing how that's like 75% of the thing is just paying for the services and using the best models. And then just like some basic slowing down and understanding of how these things work goes an incredibly long way.
So, one of the themes of this episode is what I call the blueprint trap, which is the infinitely capable models convincing us that we can take on more and more complexity. And so we architect something that still is just too big, even
Hmm.
with us plus tools like
Yeah.
the principle, the Peter principle that we rise to the level of our incompetence. We get more competent, but we take on just enough complexity to stay incompetent, and this can be a practical trap for many people. What are some ways that we can avoid taking on too much complexity? Um, Another way to think about this same problem is 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when people couldn't take on much complexity because the tooling wasn't available, you had the idea of minimum viable product. Like, don't get too carried away, just do the minimum to test whether this idea will work. We've kind of gone away from minimal viable products because you can spin up this grand structure, so why not? Um, And part of not having a blueprint trap, not having too much, is setting up a series of checkpoints that you're sure that you can achieve, like building the skyscraper, make sure the foundation is perfect first, and then the framing, and so on and so forth. So as I go about building the V2, how can I avoid overambition in the blueprint trap?
Yeah, so I mean, this is not too dissimilar from how to think about building products in the pre-AI era is you want to be uh, you want to have as much of a view into the future of the product as possible while not anchoring too hard in it. Because when you're building like a software project or I mean any kind of engineering project, you're constantly having to make trade-offs. And if you don't like say you design the website with a particular tech stack, but then in the future there was a roadmap that involved needing like some really performant workflow, but you're using like some really high layers of abstraction with your foundational tech that just can't kind of get to that performance layer, then well, you might have a huge like refactor on your hand. So you need to like to the best that you can, kind of lay out uh, what you want the product to look like, but also, yeah, be like you mentioned, having the checkpointing features of like, okay, what is the core? What are the core workflows? What are the core user experiences of this website? We need to like have those nailed tight. You kind of figure out like distill what the essence is, and you start and just do it in a very um, step by step way. So I always advocate for like having a roadmap, but holding it incredibly loosely, because the way that you figure out what your product market fit is by getting something out there and getting feedback and then iterating accordingly. So I would tell you like think about what are the user experiences, what are the like enumerate what all the user stories are, and having something like Claude or the smart LLMs in the loop for this is really helpful. Uh, have it interview you, tell it to interview you exhaustively about everything, every bit of context that it might need from you that you might have in your vision or whatever, and get that all down. And then from there, make tech stack decisions. And then from there, spend, I mean, especially when you're starting a new project, you have to spend a lot of time being very intentional about getting a good roadmap in PRD and building in a way. I know the company have Every has this concept of compound engineering. I think you might know more about this than me. I haven't looked into it specifically, but I think the idea is that they have processes in place that as you build, the code becomes it becomes easier to build on because like the code base is like self-documenting, and it's easy for LLMs to figure their way around and to really quickly get all the context that they need to be able to add the next thing, and everything's well organized. But that's the general principle is uh, yes, just being very intentional and just slowing down a little bit. It's so tempting to just jump in and say, build me the consulting website. Here's like a couple things that I want. Go. Claude will do it. Like you said, it has an answer for everything. If you tell it to build it, it'll just go. It'll start smashing code out. But then what you'll find, and this is not specific to even coding, it's just for any kind of problem you're doing with this, is that once you get a little bit down the line, it's built you something. You're like, well, shit, I actually need this other thing. But then it's laid a foundation that can't support that other thing. Or it tries to like tack on that other feature onto this foundation that was not really meant for it. And it ends up with this sloppy code base that does the opposite of compounding and the AI's ability to work on it. It makes it incredibly harder because it has to like kind of Frankenstein all these things together, which makes it really hard for the AI to in a token efficient way build a comprehensive picture of like what all the different components and systems are and what we're trying to accomplish here. So documentation is key. Code should ideally be self-documenting. I mean, I have a whole like kind of process for how to go about building projects, and which at a high level is just plan, implement, review, document. And I've got you can streamline all these things with different skills and hooks and configurations or whatever. But yeah, that's kind of high level how I'd approach it.
Is your view of optimal engineering flow currently Claude code to build and Codex to audit, or do you have Codex doing the building as well?
It is, yeah, I think that it's pretty universally considered to be the case that having Claude Code crank something out and then Codex tidy it up is the optimal workflows right now. I mean, Codex is so incredibly good that it's the first model and harness like getting performance out of these. I won't go down the tangent, but performance is a function of both the model that you're using and the harness that it's in, which is why I'm bearish on Cursor because they'll never have the ability to create as good of a harness as the providers will. But uh, Codex 5. GPT 5.3 Codex Extra High in the Codex app is an incredibly good tool. It's the best. It's the first one that I've ever felt like I don't need to audit the lines of code it writes line by line. But yeah, it's not as good on like just cranking out big features or doing design. But like it's something I'm actually wondering is I think a lot of times right now is I'll have Claude come up with a plan, and then because it's Claude has a really good plan mode, Codex does too. But I'll have Claude come up with a plan. I'll send the plan to Codex, ask it to steelman the plan basically, and then it'll steelman the plan. I'll have Claude implement it or Codex implement it. I'm kind of going back and forth, and it kind of depends on what the feature is specifically and then have Codex do a final audit before going through all other tests and security checks and stuff. But yeah, right now, I would say the optimal is either Opus 4.6 and Claude Code writing and Codex auditing, or for some things just full Codex.
Amazing. Well, we are on the schedule to go over this on Wednesday. I am deeply appreciative of this time. We went a little over. I
Okay.
hope that you will join in some later podcast episodes.
Yeah, I feel like we're just scratching the surface. There's a lot to talk about here, and a lot of really cool stuff. I mentioned to you earlier, but we've been so deep in this that I haven't really had much of a chance to get in and kind of do a zooming out kind of reflective process on lessons learned and observations from working with clients. But I think there's a lot of really good stuff there we could get into.
Well, one fruitful source of future experts, hopefully, is going out to Silicon Valley and finding more people that want to get outside the bubble. So that's a major objective. Kory, thanks so much.
Yeah, man, this is fun.